here. Just a little light.
Want to come in, please?
I know, you're going to put them in your bag. But it might be time to put them back in the enclosure. Don't put them in there. And I'll get ready for my interview. He's just so beautiful. He's looking for it.
Hello everyone, this is Borna Kazerani from Melbourne, Australia. Hope you're doing fine. Today, I'm gonna have a conversation with Tara Moss. Since 1999, Tara Moss has written 13 best-selling books, published in 19 countries and 13 languages. Her latest is internationally best-selling historical crime novel, The War Widow. Her first non-fiction book, the critically acclaimed The Fictional Woman, became the #1 national non-fiction bestseller in 2014. And her iconic cover design, featuring her face labeled with fictions or stereotypes about women, won Best Non-Fiction Book Design in 2015. Moss is an outspoken advocate for human rights and the rights of women, children, and people with disabilities, has been a UNICEF Australia Goodwill Ambassador since 2007, and since 2013 has been UNICEF Australia's National Ambassador for Child Survival. In 2015, Tara received an Edna Ryan Award for her significant contribution to feminist debate, speaking out for women, children, and inspiring others to challenge the status quo. In 2017, she was recognized as one of the global top 50 diversity figures in public life for using her position in public life to make a positive impact in diversity. Now let me ask Tara to join me for a conversation.
Hi!
Tara!
Good morning! Mwah.
Good morning to you too. How are you
I'm
doing?
really good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's quite cold here in Melbourne, so that's why I'm just wearing a layer as much as I can. So
It's not as cold
crazy
here, so I don't need the big scarf yet, but soon, I'm sure.
You know. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for being here today. Since I mentioned that you're gonna be on my show, so I've gotten lots of questions, and
Right.
as usual, that I can't get a chance to go through to every single of them. So hopefully, we could. So. Do you want to say hi to those who are watching us right now, or maybe later?
I would love to. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Borna, for this opportunity to have a chat. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's really such a privilege, and especially as an author, it can be a very lonely occupation. You spend a lot of your time alone in your office, writing fiction, writing about people that you've made up in your own mind. So it's always really delightful to speak with real people, and also to hear from readers and fans, and just to interact with the world, because it can get a little bit lonely as an author, just a little bit.
Absolutely, yes. Well, you've got an amazing biography. Anyway, when I was reading your biography, I was wondering someone should make a film about your personality and lifestyles. As I find this is extremely unique and different. You know, your curiosity and obsession in crime stories led you to obtain your private investigator credential certificate 3 from the Australian Security Academy. Who are you?
Well, you know, Borna, if ever the books don't work out anymore and I can't pay the bills, I'll be listed in the phone book as a private investigator, and you know who to call if you need anything done, right? That's, you know, but for me, I think it's really important to have authenticity in my novels. So if I'm writing about someone who's a private detective or private investigator, I want to understand the work. I want to know as much as that character should know. Within reason, of course. So if I'm writing a villain, I'm not going to commit the crime, but I'm probably going to get very close to maybe people who have, or certainly the police officers or people who work with those who have. And really, I think that research is incredibly important because readers are smart people and you can't pull the wool over their eyes. You know, you have to get the detail right. So yeah, I got my private investigator credentials because I was writing a private investigator.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And it's very, very interesting. So your latest novel is, as I mentioned on biography at the beginning. So your latest novel is internationally best-selling historical crime novel, The War Widow. What did you write this book? And talk to me about this book, please.
Thank you, Borna. This is my first historical fiction. So it's my 13th book. It's my first time tackling a book that's fiction set in the past. And I really went down the rabbit hole of research, as they say. So I've been fascinated with the 1940s since I was quite young. And I grew up on stories from that period with my Oma and Opa and the family histories. My Opa and Oma lived in Holland during the Nazi occupation. So I learned a lot about that period from them. And I've been fascinated by the resilience of everyday people living through wars, living through extraordinarily tough times. And that's what really has drawn me to the 1940s. I love the style. I love the movies from the period, film noir, hard-boiled fiction like Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe. I love all of these different elements culturally, in terms of aesthetics and in terms of the history and personal histories from the 1940s. So in a way, it's surprising that it took until book 13 for me to actually write a book set in that time. It provided me an opportunity to look at the past and look at one of the most pivotal moments sort of politically and socially for people around the world, certainly in the West, which is what I'm more familiar with, but around the world, people were heavily impacted by World War II. And that setting gave me an opportunity to really look at issues that derive from that stem from that, you know, how people survive huge changes in their lives, becoming refugees, moving to new countries, big social changes. And for my main character, her name's Billy Walker, as a woman in the 1940s, basically they were told during the war, you know, we need your help, go out and work, and we want you in the war effort. And then once women did that, the war ended and they said, okay, go home, get back in the kitchen and make the dinner for your husband. And so a lot of women were really pressured to get back out of the workforce and abandon the independence of a wage, to abandon some of the opportunities that they maybe experienced for the first time during the war. Because while there were very terrible things that happened in World War II, I mean, the suffering of World War II was astounding, and still, I mean, people are even more aware of it today than they were, I think, in the 1950s, for example. So that time really resonates, but also there was a lot of change, political and social change, and people needed to somehow adapt to that, you know. So I wanted to write a character set in that immediate post-war period who had to adapt to this social pressure. That now she's a private investigator, she's opened her own agency, she needs to pay her bills like everyone else, but she's getting this pressure that it's inappropriate for her to be working because she's a woman. It's, you know, she should step aside and let the men have the jobs and so on. So yeah, I think setting a book in this period really allows you to explore a lot of very important social issues.
Wow, that's very interesting, fascinating, actually. So why did you choose the title for your book?
Well, Billy Walker doesn't know whether or not she's a widow. Her husband, Jack Rake, was a photojournalist, and she was a journalist during World War II, covering the atrocities being committed by the Nazis in Europe. And her husband was a photojournalist, so he would take the photos and she would write the articles, trying to raise awareness about what the Nazis were doing, particularly to try to send those stories to America, where they had a very isolationist political policy through much of the war before they joined with World War II. But he has gone missing. So he was last seen in Warsaw during the uprising that took place in 1944. And so my main character has returned back to Australia, where she was born, but without her husband and without any knowledge of what's happened to him, which of course would have been a very common situation for a lot of people. There were, you know, hundreds of thousands of missing persons. Even 2 years after the war had finished, there was still many, many people who hadn't been accounted for. And so for Billy, they keep telling her she's a widow, but she's holding on to hope that maybe her husband has survived and somehow they'll be reunited.
Thank you, thank you. People keep sending me messages. We will get, I try my best. I've got my question. let me read mine. I hope finish it, and then we can go through your questions. Okay, that's very interesting, and probably approach the like film producers, because I think that's gonna be a really nice movie, like based on book. They can make it like it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Fingers crossed. I think it would be wonderful to make her into a character on film. I think she'd really eat up the screen.
Yes. And also, I was so surprised when I was reading your biography, in particular, when I read this part, when I found in 2014 you were recognized for outstanding advocacy for your blog, Manus Island, an insider's report which helped to break the information to the public about the alleged murder of Reza Barati inside the Australian-run Manus Island Immigration Detention Centre. And I've told you why, and it really surprised me, because when it happened, I work. Can you put the volume a little bit down, please?
My volume?
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, please. Sorry, because I can't hear my. When it happened, well, I work at the detention center in Manus Island, you know, as an interpreter. And I knew Reza. So when it happened, actually a week later, I arrived. And when I was reading, I thought, oh my God, such a coincidence. And tell me about this story, and then tell me about this story, and how did you get to this?
Well, there's only so much I can say, of course, because it was whistleblowers who contacted me. So I have to protect their identities and keep them anonymous. But back in 2014, I was contacted by some people that I've had contact with over the years for research for my books, because through the book research, I've met a lot of people who are in the military, in the police, in the intelligence services. And I was told that the public story, the public narrative about what happened to Reza Barati was not true, that there were people who were there contacting me directly from Manus Island, telling me this isn't true, this is what happened. And they were giving me a very important story about how Reza had been, in fact, murdered, and in the compound, because the original story was that it happened somewhere outside of the compound. And they were essentially blaming Reza himself, saying, well, you know, if you leave the compound, we can't take responsibility for what might happen to you. But he was on the compound, as you would know, Borna. So when I first got this information, the whistleblowers wanted me to make it public. And I really struggled because none of the mainstream media would touch it.
No.
They wouldn't publish that story, and they thought it was too risky to publish the story. They didn't want to be sued or to have legal problems. So I ended up having to put it on my own blog. I blogged the story. I used the photographs that the whistleblowers sent me and gave their story and their account of what happened. And it was only a few days later that that was acknowledged as the true account. And then the media started using the information that I had, and they were more comfortable to share it. So it was on Four Corners and in The Guardian and The Age and this sort of thing. And people in the general public became aware of what had happened to Reza Barati, which was really, a terrible thing that had happened. So it was something I really have to thank the whistleblowers for trusting in me. And trusting me to tell their story. And it was their words, not mine. And I wanted to use the platform that I have to shine a light on what had happened.
Good on you. Good on you. Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, so according to the law and regulation or the contract that we have, like with Department of Home Affairs or Immigration in Australia, well, I've observed thousands of horrible things, but unfortunately I have to keep it here because we cannot actually publish any articles or any story about what we've been through or what we observed, because the consequences is 3 to 5 year imprisonment, and this is crazy, but these things will end one day, and I'm sure thousands of different stories will publish, and hopefully it's not going to be too late. In 2018, you hosted the Craft of Writing series on Radio National Australia, and you were also the host, executive producer, and co-writer of Cyber Hate with Tara Moss on Australia's ABC, examining the phenomenon of online abuse, and you gave your address to the nation, Cyber Hate and Beyond, at the National Press Club in 2017, putting the phenomenon of extreme online abuse and harassment on the national agenda. Talk to me about that. This is so fascinating, and at the same time, it's so risky.
Yes, it's difficult because when you are calling out abusers, of course, you can sometimes attract more abuse. And so you need to be, I feel like I'm in a privileged position to be able to have the platform that I do, and to be able to have the support that I do. So I want to be able to use that where possible to illuminate issues that are perhaps too risky for other people to be public about. The people who get abused the most online are usually people who are minorities, who don't have as much power. And the abusers really want to push them out of public spaces. They want to remove them from the public democracy of the conversation, of thinking, of influence, So I felt a responsibility to try to shine a light on some of these areas. It was my first time producing a documentary. I was one of the executive producers on it and a writer as well as the host. So it was a very big project for me. And I wanted to get also the experiences of a really wide range of people who'd experienced abuse. And there were people with, like Muslim women who were used to being attacked for their religion, disabled women who are used to being attacked for the way they look and for their disabilities, men who were gay, who are openly gay, who are being attacked because of the homophobes, So there were all types of reasons why people were being targeted, but trolls will always try to find something that they're going to use to silence you, to threaten you, and to shut you down. And unfortunately, they tend to focus that on people that they think that they can bully the most successfully, people that they're kind of like school kids in the schoolyard who feel like they can, they can bully the one that maybe doesn't have as much support. So I think it's an important conversation to have, how it's a threat to democracy and free speech to have people being bullied out of the public domain, and And we see this kind of abuse against whether it's women who are politicians, people who are openly LGBTIQ, people who come from different backgrounds, who look different. These are the things that trolls and bullies lock onto, and they seem to spend all this time every day. I don't know where they get the time, sending threats to them. So yeah, I think it's an important conversation. It's one that's been taken up by a lot of people. And I'm just one of the many voices really talking about cyber hate.
I'm so proud of you. And why didn't you continue that program? What's happened?
Oh, well, it was a single program. It was a one commissioned program. I did 2 years of talks at schools about cyber hate. And that culminated really in the cyber hate documentary. And I also did the public national address at the press club, as you mentioned, and had the opportunity to speak with politicians about this issue and to look at what could be done. You know, it is against the law to threaten someone with death or to threaten someone with rape, and we see it every day, unfortunately, in the world of cyber hate. And it's a matter of getting the authorities to take it seriously, and also the public to know when the line is crossed between disagreement, between heated words and threats. It's not the same thing. It's okay to disagree. It's not okay to publicly threaten someone with death. And that is a very serious line when it's crossed. And I think there's been some progress made in helping people to understand there are consequences for those sorts of actions online.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and also you are also an outspoken advocate for human rights and the rights of women, children, and people with disabilities. And I will be back on disabilities later. And you've also been a UNICEF Australia Goodwill Ambassador since 2007. And since 2013, you've been UNICEF Australia's National Ambassador for Child Survival. And you've visited Australian hospitals, maternity wards, refugees, and schools, as well as Syrian refugees camps in your UNICEF role. I would congratulating you on being such an amazing human, Tara.
Oh,
and tell me, why are you doing this?
I missed the last part of your question. Why do I do this? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think as a human being, we need to acknowledge that we're all connected, and that when human rights are not respected for one person, we all suffer. You know, we need to, you know, no one is free until we're all free. No one has human rights until we all have human rights. And I think that as a group of people, we need to stand by each other and to hold up the rights of others. So I feel really privileged to be in the position that I've been in, to be able to be an ambassador with UNICEF for so many years. It's a privilege to be told the stories that I've been told, to have people trust in me with their personal stories and circumstances. So, for example, when I went to Lebanon, to the Syrian refugee camps there, and spoke with families and spoke with children, you know, you can't be unmoved by that. It's deeply affecting, and it's also a real privilege. It's an honor to have people trust in you, to open up and tell you what they've been going through. So I feel like it's my responsibility as someone with a public platform to try to have those stories and voices heard, because often they're not. And these are people, they are speaking out. They're speaking out, but they're not always being heard by others. And I think that is where people who are in a privileged position to be able to reach the public do have a responsibility to do what they can to eliminate those voices and help greater understanding between different groups of people, especially on opposite sides of the world and across cultures. There are a lot of people doing really important work in that area, and I just feel happy to have some access to them, to be able to learn from them and be able to hear these stories and I guess gain a better understanding about what's going on in the world. And yeah, those kids are just amazing. Like, you know, these little girls, like Reem was one of the girls I spent a lot of time with. She was 4 at the time that I met her. And, you know, she'd been taken from a beautiful suburb in Syria, where she was used to, you know, a lifestyle that many people say in Australia here would find very familiar and would relate to. And now she's living in a refugee camp, and she, you know, she has one toy, you know, one little toy that she's managed to bring across the world. She doesn't know where she's going to live. Her family are stressed. They're worried about her safety. They're worried about her access to medical care. And that is the situation for millions of children in the world. So we have to see that and hear that and be aware of it wherever we are in the world, and make sure that, you know, whatever we can do as international communities is keeping in mind the human rights and well-being of kids and people around the world.
I completely understand what you're saying, because I've experienced myself working, as I've mentioned, as an interpreter in PNG and Manus Island refugee camps or detention centers. That I remember that first deployment that I've experienced back in 2015, I think. When we were walking along with Red Cross on, you know, like along the refugee camps, they were begging us to pass them a bottle of water, and we were not allowed to do that. And there are thousands of things, because they are not allowed to get close to the refugees, and they were like treated like animals, and it was extremely heartbreaking. And believe or not, the whole concept and the meaning of life changed since I've experienced that deployment on Manus Island. And when I came back to Australia, I stopped complaining about the things that I do not have in my life, rather than what I have, you know what I mean? And and it's changed. It's completely changed my mentality towards the things. And people in Australia or in America, or they have no clue about these people and these people's situations actually, and different like detention centers, as refugee detention centers, and it's very heartbreaking. And
that must have been
and
so hard for you, Borna. I know you know, I don't want to put you through reliving that, but it must be really hard for you. It must have been very tough for you during that time, because I was at that point in Australia hearing from the whistleblowers about Manus Island, and I had the experience of going into those other refugee camps, which were it's not the same as Manus, but were very difficult in different ways. And I think that must have been a very tough experience for you. The feeling of helplessness is really hard, I think.
Exactly. When you started, I want to change the.
Sure. Of course.
And people, I've got more than 300 questions. I will go through that, but let me just finish first. When you started writing, none of these social platforms exist, and you had to work so hard to become who you are today. Now you can talk about your book and your activities right away throughout your page. I'd like you to talk to me about your experiences regarding of using different social platforms.
So I find that social media has a lot of really positive things to offer, and I didn't have that when I was first starting out, as you mentioned, Borna. So my first book came out in 1999, and there was not really a strong social media presence. Obviously, as someone who did this documentary, Cyber Hate, I'm also aware of the downsides of social media, and those things are real, and we need to be structured in our use of social media to make sure we look after our mental health and safety. But there are so many strong elements to social media to connect people, to gain greater understanding, and to also go around the cultural gatekeepers, if you will. You can publish a story like I did about Manus Island without getting the approval of a big network or a media organization that might have greater restraints. You know, that might be unable to do that. I can do that through my own blog, or I can reach people directly with my own voice on Instagram or on Twitter. And I couldn't do that early in my career. And in fact, one of the stranger things that's happened in my career was when I was dared to take a polygraph test, which is a lie detector test, to prove that I write my own books, because my previous career was as a fashion model. And so when I went from fashion model to being a novelist, some people who believe in dumb model stereotypes, which is just silly, some people who believe in those stereotypes went, oh, well, she couldn't have possibly written, she must be dumb, she can't write her own books. So I ended up taking a polygraph test and proving them wrong, you know. But I don't think that would have happened if social media had been around then, because people would know me, who I am, instead of just a picture. Mm-hmm. If you see a picture, it's one-dimensional. It never tells the full story. And, you know, I love Instagram. We're doing Instagram Live right now, but obviously an Instagram photo is never all of the truth. It's never the whole story. You have to look at a well-rounded life. You have to look at all aspects of a person. No one is one-dimensional, and it doesn't matter what career path they have or how they look in a photograph. They always have more happening than that. But before social media, it was very difficult to express myself directly to the public. Now people feel like they know me. I'm very open about my life. I can answer their questions if they're not sure about something. But before social media, I wasn't able to do that. And now also, as someone who has a disability, I've got mobility issues, I'm able to be in touch with the disability community on Instagram and online. And it is a really strong community where we have each other's backs, we learn from each other. You know, I've learned so much and found it so welcoming. And especially if you have a disability and it's hard to get around, it's going to be harder for you to get together in a group with other people like you. So social media does allow people to find each other, to find others that they can connect with on different levels. And I feel that's why I enjoy spending time online as well as spending time offline. You know, I think it's part of my life now, and I find that it's been overall really rewarding. And I get to meet people like you, Borna.
Thank you. I want to ask you a favor. So,
yes.
But before that, because I want to read one of those questions. Yes. I'm going. Oh my God, the questions are a lot. So, let's answer one of them, and then I want to ask you a favor. I want you to give us a tour and just go and show off the stuff you've got. And I love people see what you're doing there. So, but before that, let me choose one of those questions. There are lots of questions. So, all right. I'm just sorry from the last one. So, what is your dream subject matter, theme to tackle next?
So, my dream to tackle next, or just to tackle. So, my dream subject matter is writing about strong women. I've been doing it for 21 years now in fiction and nonfiction. So stories that center women and girls and people whose voices maybe aren't usually centered in stories. That's my dream. And I love the characters in The War Widow and that series with Billy Walker. I love strong central characters like them. I love Sam, who's come back from the war with disabilities, who's an incredible hero in this, as well as Shyla, who's a Wiradjuri woman, an Aboriginal woman from here in Australia, and she's a real heroine as well in this book. I just love writing about people. I find people incredibly interesting, and I try to look for perspectives that are a little bit different than what we normally see as the heroes in books, you know, the story that the type that we normally see in a book. I like to subvert that and change it a little bit. But I'm always looking for new subject matter. So, you know, anything out there that's going on in the world, I'm probably going to find it very interesting, and it might end up in a book.
Great. So the same person asked, during your research for this book, I think she means like the book that's the War Widow. Did you do anything that might to consider it risky or unusual?
I'm always doing unusual things for my books. I've been set on fire for research. I've been choked unconscious for research. And do not try this at home. Those are very dangerous things to do. I did both of those with supervision from professionals, so don't do that at home. For this, though, I spent a lot of time going through a lot of old things from the period, from the 1940s. This is a Gregory's Guide to Sydney from 1947. Going through old blueprints and things. This is the office for my character, Billy Walker. It's in Daking House. It's a YWCA or a YMCA at the moment. So it's a hostel, but it's a historical building, and it's where Billy has her offices. So you can actually stay. You could like be a backpacker and stay in Billy's office from the books. What else did I do? I spent time at the Central Courts, the old Central Police Station. I can only get a certain level of access, so I'm always trying. I've been to Quantico, to the FBI Academy there. But specific things for the War Widow, there was a lot of historical research for this one. And then, of course, my research in shooting weapons, in spending time with SWAT teams and police and private investigators, all came into play. I've been out on jobs with private investigators and done surveillance and followed people, which is a very uncomfortable experience for me, Borna, because I don't like to, I like to feel very ethically above board, you know, like very open. And then when you're doing surveillance on someone, it's, you can't let them know you're there. And it's a very, it was a very weird thing for me to follow people around and take notes about them. It was for a job, but I learned a lot from that, and it gave me an idea of how that would feel as a person to do that as a part of your work. So yeah, I've done all kinds of things. I have my race car driver's license. I've done loops over the Sydney Opera House. I've pulled 4.5 Gs in a fighter plane. I've done a lot of things to get a sense of experiences so I can write about them. And I guess I don't want to give too much away about the content of The War Widow, but a lot of those different research experiences that I've had go into the fleshing out the characters in that novel and my previous ones, like the Mac Vanderwall series, and even to an extent my Pandora English series. All the things I learned go into each of my books.
Okay, thank you. And there are lots of questions. So, well, I think you answered. Hi, Borna. Will author Tara Moss ever turn the book into a movie? Well,
oh, I would love that. I'm really hopeful that Billy Walker will become a character on the big screen. I think she would be incredible because she is she's a smart woman of action. She's a character who's very physical as well as you know, a good thinking, smart, clever character. So she'd be quite exciting to watch, racing around in her Willys Roadster car, and with her, she's got a pearl-handled Colt that she wears on her thigh, as a private investigator from the 40s would do. So I would love that. I'm also working to try to get the McCady Vanderwall series, which was my contemporary crime series, out as a TV series, because I think that would be, I think Mac would be great on the screen as well. She's a character who rides motorbikes, who has a great roundhouse kick, again, very physical as well as being very resilient and brave. And smart, yeah. But again, flawed. All my characters are flawed as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be very interesting. So I would love to see adaptations of my work. And I wish it was up to me to choose these things, but we're dependent on, you know, the funding and the producers, and all I'll say is fingers crossed.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. Okay, this is the last question. Um, Hey Tara, sorry. Hey Tara, I'm from Germany. I want to say thank you for such amazing book you wrote.
No.
And also I'm very interested myself in your field. What's the advice do you have for someone who wants to become a writer or author?
Well, first of all, hello to Germany. The War Widow is coming out in Germany in January in a translation there. I think it's Die Jagerin, I think is how you pronounce the title there. So I hope you enjoy it. My advice for writers is first of all to write. So it's possible to get yourself quite concerned about getting every word right before you begin. That's a mistake. It will give you writer's block if you're always second guessing yourself and thinking, oh no, I can't start yet. My advice is to try to write a little bit every day. Also to read a lot of books. Reading and writing and being involved in stories on the page is a great way to stay connected as a writer. And also to meet other writers, to connect with other writers online or in your community or both. Join a writers group if there is one where you live, and get connected with, you know, with people who are interested in books, like-minded people. I find that that's a really helpful way to hone your reading skills, and your writing skills are very closely connected. So if you're reading and thinking about the written word a lot and writing a bit each day, it helps to hone your craft. And yeah, do a writing course if you can. I did a writing course in Australia back in the late 90s. I joined Sisters in Crime, which is a women's crime writing group. I joined my local writers center, and I try to stay connected with those groups. It's been 21 years now, and I still stay connected. When I moved to a new city, which I did recently, moving back to British Columbia in Canada, I connected with authors there. I have a lot of Canadian author friends, and that is how you stay, you know, connected and focused on writing. So it might sound simple, but write it. You don't have to write it right, just write it, and you can make it right later. The editing process takes a lot of time with a book. So you have to know that you can just put it down, you can write it, and then you can come back to it and you can fix it. Don't get too worried about making it perfect the first time you write that sentence. I hope that advice
Exactly.
helps.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you. I can't actually read anymore. And so, if you want to ask Tara directly, you can go to her page later on after we finish our conversation. So, Tara, you ready to take us with you and show what?
I'm going to show you a few little things. We're half packed and half unpacked at the house here because COVID. I've been living in Vancouver, and with COVID, we got locked back into our house in Australia, which has been wonderful because we have a great place here. But it means we're between countries with lots of suitcases. But I'm going to show you a few things. So here we go. I've turned it around. So here's my husband and daughter and I in our 1940s clothes at one of our 1940s parties. We usually celebrate Victory Day each year with our friends, and they tell stories about their relatives and ancestors and their experiences in the 1940s to keep us connected with that period. This is my Oma and Opa. So there's my Opa and there's my Oma. And I want to tell you a quick story about them. I mentioned that they were in Holland in World War II. And what I want to tell you about is the reason why I dedicated the War Widow to them. So the War Widow is dedicated to them and all the ordinary people who did extraordinary things in World War II. My Opa was taken by the Nazis because he was an able-bodied Dutchman, and that's what they did with them at the time. And they forced him to work in a work camp in Berlin, which was a long distance away. He and my Oma had small children at the time, so you can imagine what it would have been like to have your your husband, the father of your children, taken away by the Nazis. And he had been a baker by trade. So what my Oma used to do is she would smuggle sugar and flour in the hollows of her bicycle, and she would cycle across Holland all the way to Berlin to visit him, and she would give him those ingredients. And he used those ingredients to bake bread in the munitions ovens of the Nazi work camp he was forced to work in. And he used the bread to bribe the foreman. And eventually the foreman gave him a day pass so he could see his family outside of the gates of the work camp. And that's how he escaped. Once he was outside of the gates, he fled. And he fled by foot at night for days, walking all the way back to his family in Holland. And he stayed basically in hiding for the rest of the war, worried that they would come back to try to take him away. And that's just one example of the types of stories that I grew up with, and why. I mean, I know there have been lots of things that have happened since that have been big experiences for people in the world. But for me, growing up with those stories of World War II, it's one of the reasons those stories resonate. And I think they still resonate now in 2020, even though some circumstances have changed, some things are the same. So just showing you.
That's Tara. Okay, that's the next Tara's book subject.
Yes, thank you. So here are just a few of my books. You mentioned The Fictional Woman. So there's me on the cover of that book with a lot of the fictions that I had dealt with at that time. So I was blonde way back when. My hair is now naturally very dark. So I've turned into a smoldering brunette, but with salt and pepper grays. But I was once blonde, so I used to get dumb blonde all the time. I used to get, you know, nice words and not so nice words, like mother is a beautiful word. Gold diggers, horrible and false. I would be called an inspiration, but also be called, you know, I can say it, a bitch as well in the same day, sometimes publicly. So that book was about the fictions we have around women and the stereotypes and labels we use for women and girls. And they would be different for each group of people. Other groups get different types of slurs and different types of stereotypes. Here are a couple of my walking sticks. This is Wolfie. So I have an Instagram page called Tara and Wolfie. And this is Wolfie. She is one of my favorite walking sticks. I take her around and she's wonderful. And that is the little cane strap I use for Wolfie. This is my rollator, which is like a walker with wheels. You can see it's a bit dirty because I've been taking it out off-road. So that's been really helpful for me. Yeah.
Why do you use walker for?
So I have a disability that impacts my mobility. So I need support after an injury to my right hip that happened about 4.5 years ago. So I've had the experience of going from having a very healthy body that was able to kind of do what I wanted it to do, which I was very lucky to have, to having a disability. And these mobility aids help me a lot. This is my latest cane, which is beautiful. And it helps to reduce my pain, and it helps me to stay mobile, to use these mobility aids. But I want to show you something really cool about this cane. So gone are the days where walking sticks are boring. This one lights up. I don't know if you can see that. It actually lights up. So, so there's lots of really cool stuff there. And I've been using the Tara and Wolfie Instagram page to try to normalize the use of mobility aids, particularly because there's an idea that it's for people who are only very old, but there are a lot of younger people who use mobility aids for a whole range of different conditions. And as one of those people, I'm not so young, but you know, I'm not what people expect when they see someone using a walker. And I think showing that and making that very visible in public is helpful to reduce the stigma of disability and also remove the stigma of mobility aids. Because a lot of people would benefit from them but are ashamed to leave the house with their mobility aid because of the stigma. So I'd like to see that change in the world. What else can I show you? There are so many cool things here, but again, a lot of it has been packed away. Here is a grandfather's uniform from World War II and a 1940s coat that I've been mending. So I like to wear a lot of vintage. My necklace, for example, is from the 1960s. A lot of my vintage, though, is from the 1940s, as that is, you know, my area of interest. And I'm very passionate about the sustainable possibilities of vintage clothing, because you can mend that clothing, salvage that clothing, and get a lot more years out of it. So yeah, I'm pretty excited by vintage and find that to be something that gives me joy personally. And you'll probably notice online that I've always got the red lipstick. Again, that's a nod to the 1940s. And my main character, Billy Walker, wears a lipstick that was a real one in the 1940s called Fighting Red. It was made by Tussie in the 40s during the war. So this is my Fighting Red. So you'll, when I went to the refugee camps, there was another woman there who's an aid worker who just wore red lipstick. She didn't sort of do anything else. Again, I don't dye my hair or anything, but I like my Fighting Red lipstick. And she was always known as the one with the red lips. So now I'm always known with my Fighting Red. And it's just part of my identity and what gives me a little bit of joy each day. And so I think it's, you know, the world can be tough sometimes. And if you can find something simple that doesn't hurt other people, that helps you to feel ready for the day and a little bit more, give you a little bit more joy, then that is a good thing to do. So you'll probably always see me with my Fighting Red lipstick, and probably with some vintage or something. And that's part of how I feel good in the body that I'm in.
That's the most important. As long as it's something makes you feel happy, even those small things that you mentioned, it's very important. And before I forget, I need your book. I can't wait to read your book.
Yes,
and
I'm going to send you a copy.
Yes, absolutely. And then I'm more than happy to like advertise your book. And Tara, I'm so proud of you. And I'm so glad you're here on my show. I have to wrap it up. And thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed having a conversation with you. Did you like our conversation?
I loved it, Borna, and congratulations on your show, and congratulations on giving a voice to such a diverse group of people through your platform. It's really wonderful what you do, and I think, you know, you do it very well, and your energy and your passion for human stories is really inspiring. So thank you for including me, and thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us. It's been a real pleasure, a real privilege to be able to chat today.
Thank you so much, darling. I really appreciate it. Hopefully to see you one day in reality.
Yes, indeed. I'll see you in real life. In the meantime, I'll send this book to you, and I hope you enjoy it.
I would.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye, darling. Thank you very much for watching us. I had a great conversation with author Tara Moss. And I'm sorry that if I didn't get a chance to go through your questions. So if you have any question or questions from Tara, you can go to her page. And then she also mentioned where you can buy or get her book from. So, and that's it. Love you all. Take care. Thank you very much for your support. Appreciate that. And keep your smile.